This is the intro to the motion control workspace, probably one of our more complicated workspaces. You can get to the motion control workspace with this icon here. Now, if you ever go to look for an icon that isn't up here for the workspace, you're going to want to control click on the name and you can either turn on or turn off the icons up here. So I think when Dragonframe comes loaded, it may not include motion control up there, and it's just because we want to keep this kind of clean for most people. And so anyway, there's a way to control what you have icon-wise up there. All right, so here we are in the motion control workspace, and I've already got a pretty complicated rig hooked up, which is represented by all these axes controls over here. Okay, let's go over the different quadrants here. This top area with the V, this is for velocity. This is where you'll see real subtle changes in speed and where you'll see things that might cause a bump up in here. But your main programming is going to happen in this space. This is where you'll see your keyframes, and you'll be able to move keyframes and adjust them over time or over distances. This area down below is where you will build up your separate axes that you'll use to run your motors. I'm right now in a virtual axis mode, which is kind of an advanced mode, but we'll get into that on another tutorial. This area right here is for information regarding keyframes. As you start to lay down keyframes, this will tell you what the frame positions are, what the motor positions are, what the distances you've traveled between keyframes. This button right here that says upload move, this is actually a really important. Whenever it says upload move, you're going to want to click it, which I just did. That just updates the system with whatever the current information is about the position of the camera and movement programming. This bottom area here has some pretty important buttons in it. The one you'll probably use the most is this icon that looks like a little movie camera. And what that does is it shoots move tests. We'll actually shoot a move test today in this little overview. This button right here that looks like a movie reel will publish a move test. So it'll take it out of the system inside of Dragonframe and it'll save it somewhere else. It also has the e-stop button, but remember that your emergency stop button is also the escape key on your keyboard. You can also wire up a big button into the DMC16 or the DMC Plus, or even if you've set up an Arduino system. All these buttons above here will move the camera into different positions for different reasons. Next keyframe, where the playhead is, to the current frame. Like with a lot of software, there are a few different ways to get to where you want to go, and this has some shortcuts in it that you may never use because you're going to use buttons over here. One of the important buttons over here that isn't replicated anywhere else is this setting for go motion or blur motion. We find that most blur motion is done in post these days and is, looks pretty good. And sometimes people don't want blur motion on the frames because they're trying to do some compositing and they'd rather composite everything together and then add blur. It's a lot easier than trying to kind of blur another object and make it match. But if you want to do traditional blur where the camera is actually moving while it's opening and closing the shutter, you're going to click into here and you are going to set a degree like the old shutter angle. So for instance, like a 180 would be very standard blur, 175. And then once that's set, then you can come over here to each axis and turn on, in this area, turn on the blur motion where it's applicable. Okay, turn that off. You turn this off, by the way, just by going down to 0. There's another area that sort of pops up when you select it, which is the live viewing mode. So you have a small version, which puts a live view up into the velocity area, or we have a slightly bigger view that you can then adjust and it takes up a little bit more space, and then you can do your programming here and see your velocity up there. Let's talk about this toolbar area. This is really critical too. Over here we have a very important menu that's got a lot of different options in there. We've got an add track. When you're first putting in your important information about your motors, you're going to add tracks here, and then you're going to double click on them like this, and you'll open up and put in all the important information regarding the calibration of the motor and the speeds and top speeds and jogging speeds and all of that. And if you have any limit switches or if you want to set soft limits, that can be done in here too. You may notice I'm hitting this button, this V, and this is switching me from the real axes to the virtuals. I just happen to have a virtual rig set up, so I have to program in virtuals. Over here to the right are all the kind of keyframe styles that you can use when you're programming. Normally we would use this auto. It's just a standard auto key, and that works for laying down all your keys. Then you might want to go back in and adjust them a little bit. The other one you may use is this feather. This should go on any keyframe that is starting from 0 velocity, so you're starting from a standstill, or ending in a 0 velocity. You probably want to put a feather on it just to add a little softness as you're either coming into speed, speeding up, or you're slowing down and stopping. If you really want it to feather in to a nice soft landing, then you'd add that. So we'll go ahead and do that right now. So I'm just going to do a really simple push in. I'm going to use one of the cool tools that's in the virtuals, which right now my camera is facing down. It's on a long arm here in the room, but I want to go straight up on the lens. So I'm going to use this button down here, this line button, and I'm going to go backwards on the camera. Okay, so let's grab the playhead and we're going to drag it, and let's just do like, yeah, we'll just do 3 seconds. By the way, these watermelon lines here, I like to call them, or these stripes, are always based on seconds. So whatever you have set in your main workspace for your frames per second, this is going to just give you seconds. An easy way just to look right at the screen and know how many seconds a shot is. So I'll put that at 3 seconds and put a keyframe here. This is a key all button. So when I hit this, it's going to put a key on all of these. I could also key these separately like this, but we'll just go ahead and key all. You'll notice that there's one big bright line. All of the axes are kind of stacked on top of themselves right now. So because we don't have a secondary position. So now I'm going to take the playhead and drag it back to the beginning, and we're going to find a start point. So I'm going to use this key down here, which again is a sort of a speciality of virtuals. What it's going to do is it's going to move different axes all together as one unit to make a straight line going up. So it's a classic move. Okay, so now we're there. I'm going to make a little bit of an adjustment and track in a little bit so that we can center up on that ball there. And now we're going to click on focus. Now what's cool here is if you go into your focus axis and you name the function focus, that does a pretty cool thing. When you click on the focus axis layer here, you will get a focus area window if your camera has that functionality. Now you can click on that. That blows that up to give you a close-up while you are adjusting focus. Here's where you adjust. Oh, overshot a little bit. Again, it's tight game. It's a tight game. Okay, so now that's in focus. I'm going to click on the screen so we back out, and we'll just call that our first position. So we're going to actually drop in on this seed ball here. So I'm going to keyframe all of them. You see we've got this curve on certain tracks. Now I know that I'm going to want a little bit more of an ease on these endings, and remember what I said about axes that go to 0 velocity. So I'm just going to go ahead and select everything and hit feather, and you'll see it puts a nice little curve at the beginning and the end, and each one of these feathers can be adjusted too. You can grab this is actually moving all of them together. It's kind of cool, and you can add more feather or subtract depending on the feeling of the move. So now we have just, a 2-point camera move. I'm going to put the playhead in the center, and I'm going to send all the axes to that point. And by doing that, you hit this little go to playhead button like this, and everything is moving. So now we're going to go to the middle, and the reason we're going to go to the middle is we want to check the focus in the middle. And you can see it's not that great. So again, I click on the screen there, and there we go. And now I'll set a keyframe in the middle of this shot. We'll upload that. All right, and that should get us pretty close. Let's see what this looks like. What we can do is drag the playhead back to 1, send each motor, and we can shoot a little move test with this button here. And I'm going to go real time because I've got a DMC Plus working the system. And if you have one of our DMC controllers, you can run your moves in real time, your test moves. And I'm going to run at a frame rate of 4 frames per second. And what it's going to do, instead of shooting actual frames of the camera, it's just going to grab video feed frames as we're moving slowly through. And then it'll play it back to us. It may not be 100% perfect, but it'll be 99% perfect as far as being able to look at the move and get a judgment if the move's going to work. So here we go, we're shooting the move test. You'll also see that if you have a really long move test, you can have this notification set up to send you an email. It's pretty cool. You'll see that the move test keeps shooting and shooting, and that's because I have a out set way down the line, and I should have moved that out point inward. So we'll do that in a second. So it's just shooting extra frames here at the end. So we have an in and out point that's used for shooting move tests. It's kind of cool because if you have a really long shot, you can use the in and out to just replace part of a move test, which is is kind of cool. You don't have to reshoot the whole thing. If I hit this button right here, this with these two little yellow brackets, that will show me what is programmed as the entire move. So I'm going to move this bracket over here all the way just past the end of the move like that. And now we'll hit the bracket again. The bracket, I use this all the time, this bracket function, because if I blow up the shot to look at something in the programming, I can always kind of back up and see the whole thing. Okay, so let's take a look at what we just shot. Here's the play button right here for looking at move tests. Okay, now that did a little bump, but I think that was just the playback. Yeah, there we go. So I don't know if you can see that through the screen capture, but it's very smooth. Push in. Okay, let's look at what's happening here. Now, this might be a little overwhelming because there's all these lines on the screen, but we have all these tools in our axis to solo. So I could solo track, east-west. Not a lot going on east-west. I'll turn that off. Let's see, nothing going on tilt, north-south. Lots happening there. In fact, it's almost exactly the same profile. You can use these little sliders here on all the axes to scale the viewing of the motion arc. So I can just go like this. And this isn't changing the move, it's just allowing me to see the beginning and ends, and I can see how these are working together. Also, there's focus, that has kind of a complicated move on it. Now I'm noticing that focus and track have got almost the same color. I don't like that. I'm gonna go, let's go blue-green with it. Let's go blue-green, okay, kind of cyan, kind of a thing like that. All right, so now we got a cyan line there. And you don't have to have all the axes up when you're working and you're programming. So let's look at the velocity up here. It's a very simple, just 2-point move, so nothing too complicated. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of roll to this. But just for fun, let's program this not by setting keys by driving, but just type it in. We'll go to the 1 position like this. I'm gonna click on roll. And roll already has keyframes because we keyframed all, so there are keyframes there. And you can see that we start at negative 0.02 degrees and we end at negative 0.2 degrees. So all I have to do is click in here and say go 30 degrees. Okay, so now we actually have quite a move programmed in here. So from 1 to 73, and we've got this happening. Okay, so I'm going to upload the move. We're at the end of the move, and these gray areas around the playhead icon show that we are in the correct position for this frame. So frame 73, we are in that position. Now roll isn't because we just typed it in, but if I hit this, it's going to go, okay, you want me to go there? And it will rotate 30 degrees. So now there's some cool things you can do when all of the axes are on the frame position. Now, if you see if I move this, those positions change, and so therefore they're not on the playhead. So now that they are on the frame like that, there's a couple things you can do. You could jog with these jog controls. Like I grab this and go like that, and then stop. Another thing you could do is if you hold on the option key and the playhead turns white, this is pretty cool. You can do that, it turns white, and now you could say, I want you to go specifically to drive to frame 56, for instance. And you let go, and the rig will drive to frame 56. Well, I want to go to 0, so I'm just going to go like this, and, well, frame 1. We don't use 0 in Dragonframe. Okay, so now let's shoot it with the little rotation happening in it. Again, a move test running at 4 frames per second. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to use a space bar. It looks pretty good. Looks pretty cool. Now let's say I wanted to continue programming, but I wanted to save this move. I could come up here to this film reel icon and say Save Move Test, and I could name it. We'll call this Spin 1. What's really cool about this is that, let's say I selected all these keyframes and I said, let's make it just dive into this move straight with no eases. And so I hit this keyframe style. Let's say we shot this and looked at it and went, well, you know what? I don't like it. You could come back up here. You could say, take me to spin 1. And then you could come down here and say, import the move. And it says, do you want to overwrite the program? You say yes. And now that brought in the move that was programmed and associated with that move test, which is really great because you don't have to now save out a move and then save out a move test and make sure that they're named exactly the same and put them in a folder together. You can just go through, do a bunch of different move ideas, shoot move tests, save them, and it saves the program move with it. That's made my life much easier on the set. But you know what? Let's try this idea of, instead of easing into this shot, let's imagine that it cuts and we're already falling and we don't want that ease, okay? So here's what we do. We're going to select all these keys. I want to make sure I'm over here in the virtuals. And you know what? I'm going to, just to be safe, I'm going to select everything. So now that I've taken some of the solos off, everything shows up here. I select all the first keys, and then I'm going to hit this button, which is going to make them not have that ease in. I'm also going to turn off the feather because that's going to be confusing in there. Again, we're just rocking at this point right into the shot. So let's go ahead and shoot a move test of this. I'm uploading the move, and we will drive back. So I just said, go to the left bracket here. I didn't even hit that. I just hit this go to left bracket. Looks like our focus gets off a little bit. Okay, now let's see how this one is different. See, it just starts out moving. And of course, we'd have to go back in and massage the focus to make everything work. So that's the overview, intro to the motion control workspace. There's a lot to go into, lots of layers to this thing, so we'll be bringing you a lot of new and separate specific tutorials, and also to show all the new advances we've been adding in 4.2. Thanks.